You are listening to Why Such a Fuss podcast, sponsored by CVG Solutions, with your host, Cristina Vanini-Goodchild, and guests.
Today, I'm pleased to have with me Sona Mehta, who has been a guest previously and is returning. Sona is a senior law lecturer at the City St George's, part of the University of London, and a qualified solicitor with over 20 years' experience in the data protection world. And also has taken on a new role as a NED, non-executive director as well. So you're keeping busy.
I certainly am, yes.
So great to have you back. Always a pleasure, Sona.
Thank you for having me, Cristina.
Good.
Lovely to be here.
Now, what I wanted to do today is explore the role of the DPO, Data Protection Officer, because it's not really as straightforward as many organizations think. Now, in my experience, bearing in mind that, I'm working primarily with small and medium organizations, this role is not always understood in terms of what the role is and what it does, okay? And, the responsibilities and the duties of the DPO, primarily, for example, the statutory element of the role is not clear, or it's clear to me and it's clear to you, but it's not necessarily fully understood by businesses, what they actually mean.
Absolutely.
So I was wondering, since you're the solicitor in the room, if you could explain that.
No pressure. Can I explain it? Well, I think like a lot of the data protection regulation, it's deliberately not prescriptive. So I think the role of the data protection officer is really to provide guidance and support to the processors or the controllers of the data, whoever's using the data. So in terms of who can fulfill that role and what it entails, I guess to an extent you can only provide guidance if you know the subject matter.
Yeah. But what does the actual statutory element mean? What does that mean that it's a statutory role?
The role is, well, as you know, it's not necessary for every business to have a designated officer as such. There's certainly the need for someone to deal with data protection queries and subject access requests, and if they're handling personal data, but only specific companies or organizations are required to have an official data protection officer.
Yes, and what the statutory means is that it is the regulation that determines what those responsibilities are, and as you said, it's not every business will need one. There is a specific criteria. If you meet that criteria, you will obviously need a mandatory DPO, but quite a few organizations are also voluntarily appointing one.
Absolutely. I think a lot more companies are appreciating that they're using a lot of data, personal data, and therefore there is the need perhaps, or the desire to exercise caution, have a little bit more protection of having someone advise as to whether they are using the data and keeping the records and complying with the regulations as they should be. So whilst, as you said, it might not be mandatory, I mean, it's mandatory for public authorities or people or organizations who are conducting large scale monitoring and that sort of thing. The smaller companies that aren't undertaking those activities may well want a data protection officer in place to support the business, particularly as businesses are growing and using more and more data, and as AI is coming in. We're all, everyone's seeing an increased use of data, and obviously with more data come more issues and more awareness by the general public or the end user, the customers, of what's going on with their data, and perhaps the desire to want to know more.
Yes, and it's really interesting in terms of if you are a business that either, mandatory has to have a DPO, or you are voluntarily deciding to have a DPO to support, which is never a bad idea. What you need to make sure is that when you are selecting or nominating the DPO, it can't just be anyone from the street kind of thing. The regulation is quite clear that the person fulfilling this role must have expert knowledge of the regulation.
Absolutely. It goes back to what I said. You can't assist and support a business in a particular area if you don't know that area. But in terms of your background, we've had, as we've seen DPOs who have a legal background, who have a technical background, who have a marketing background, because data protection covers so many different areas. It's more about, does the individual understand the regulation, understand the requirements of what the regulation needs, requires a business to have, and is able to liaise with the organisation to hold them accountable.
Yes. And also, the other thing that an organisation needs to be aware of is that when selecting or nominating the DPO, they must make sure that if this individual is also responsible for other work within the organisation, there must not be any conflict of interest. So I've seen quite a few times, like, for example, the head of HR also fulfilling the DPO role, or the CIO, doing the DPO role, or the finance director, or any directors really. Those will create conflict of interest. So those individuals that already have those roles are not actually suitable for doing the DPO because of the conflict of interest, not necessarily because of ability and capability.
Absolutely.
But it's more in regard to the conflict of interest. Now, there is something... Yeah, sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say the rule of thumb is if anyone's involved in any decision making when it comes to processing data, they should not be a DPO.
Yes.
But a DPO has to have a reporting line to senior management.
Yes, and I want to cover that in a little bit, because there is something else that I came across some time ago. This is very earlier on when the regulation came out. That there was sort of, I don't know, an assumption, if I can put it that way, that someone in risk management could take on the DPO role, and logically, first thing you look at it and you say, well, actually, it makes sense, because data protection is all about risk management. But actually, there was a case in Luxembourg that where it was ruled by the judge that actually someone performing a risk management role has a conflict of interest with the DPO role. So that it's really interesting, and actually, when you think about it, it makes sense, because the the CIRO, the senior risk manager, is actually primarily interested in, first of all, the business interest and business risk rather than data protection, and also it might make decision that might be in a position where there is conflict of interest between safeguarding the business and safeguarding the data. Does that make sense? And the individuals. And so actually, logically, it kind of makes sense. Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, if you're involved in any sort of decision making relating to how data is processed, how can you be independent in your review of the way the organisation is processing the data? If you can see a financial benefit in the business going forward in a particular direction, using data in a particular way, that might sway sway your decision making process as to whether the processing is actually done correctly.
Yes. So what about someone who is fulfilling the role of head of compliance? See, I'm not sure about that.
Well, it depends what the compliance, as head of compliance, are you involved in making decisions, or are you purely reporting
Yeah,
on the
that's
status
true.
quo of the business? Because I think the data protection officer's role is really to flag up the risks. As you said, it's all about risk management.
Yes.
Now, if the compliance manager is then making a decision based on that risk and a business decision to proceed down one avenue or another, then I think you've got a conflict.
Yeah, but I've also seen situation where, sort of the head of compliance who's very sort of ISO 9001 kind of, background or driven would, have a bit of more of steer, if you want, towards that standard rather than data protection. Not intentionally, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but just because there is there almost like right hand versus left hand, they're more
yes,
right-handed, so to speak.
yeah. That's what they know. Better,
And so it's
perhaps,
the
as well.
nature and something. But that's why I'm saying, could head of compliance really truly be a DPO with no conflict of interest? Do you see what I mean? See, I think the other way around. So I think that someone that is, it is a pure data protection person can actually extend to, compliance, ISO, whatever, because they will be able to then understand the conflict of interest, address it, and obviously prioritize the legal side versus a standard, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think the other way around, I think, is dangerous.
I think I can see where you're coming from. There's the danger of things being overlooked.
Yeah.
Not deliberately, as you say.
No, yeah.
So there could be a danger. I guess it depends on how much support the compliance officer has, and it may be, if there is a team, then it might be easier.
Yes.
If it's one person, you're right.
Yeah. So it depends on the situation in that scenario, and I think the same will be for the like a head of information security, for example. I think it's the same scenario because see, the information security individual again will focus on ISO 27001, which there's nothing wrong with that, but ISO 27001.
Yes.
I'll get the number right. Is there to support data protection, and again is a standard, is not the law. And so again there could be conflict of interest, again not intentional, but simply because that is the area of expertise, and so they will naturally move more towards that area. Yeah,
but there's so much more to data protection than just ISO.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is why
that's the issue, isn't it?
That's the issue, you see. So, and I remember, because when I first started my business, I wanted to understand, information security. So I just did a course, not to become an auditor or anything like that, but just to understand, ISO 27001. And I remember sort of the teacher, was talking about having policies, and so on, that sort of support each other, and like an architect of policies.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, so where would data protection policy fit into the structure? And the answer was data protection policy will fit underneath the information security. And I thought, then you don't understand. You see,
no,
got
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm saying there is a danger that someone head of information security might not fully understand that actually data protection is the overarching umbrella and information security is just one pillar.
Yes. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
So I'm not saying it can't be done, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there has to be the additional thinking behind, and cautious behind,
and an awareness. Yes,
absolutely, yes. And and you've already touched on this, that you said that, again, the regulation stipulates that the role must report to the highest level of management. So that means that this individual, is a senior role, it's a part of the leadership team. I don't mean, it doesn't have to be, reporting directly to a CEO, for example. That's not what I mean. It depends on the size and complexity of the organization. Yeah. But equally, it can be someone, do you know what I mean, 3 or 4 line underneath.
Yeah.
But I've also seen organization, primarily in the small and medium, arena, where, a junior member of staff has been given this role. And, not only they're totally out of their depth and therefore they've been set up to fail, which is unfair, but also they don't have the authority or the empowerment to actually do anything
and that's the big issue, isn't it? Because
yes,
the data protection officer has to, well, as an employer, you've got to ensure that officer is involved properly and in a timely manner in all issues relating to data protection.
Yes.
And that they're provided resources necessary to support their function and to enable them to maintain their expertise. So if you're, as is often the way, someone more junior is given that role, it's not always possible to enable them to fulfill that role, and then the employer, the organization, is falling foul of their duties and their responsibilities.
Yes, and but also, they're setting up the employee to fail.
Absolutely. And actually then it serves no purpose at all, because it's looking bad on the employee who's set up to fail, but also, even worse, it's if it got, escalated, if issues got escalated.
Yes.
I mean, that's an organisation that is going to struggle to defend its practices.
Yes, absolutely. And then, again, like you say, if it shows bad on the organisation, because actually then it becomes just a tick box exercise.
Exactly.
So then the DPO is not actually doing the role of the DPO. So we've eliminated quite a few roles.
But actually, on that, the DPO not being a DPO, that I was looking, preparing for this podcast, and I came across a case in Italy, actually, where there was a lawyer, it was a legal representative that was given the position of a DPO. And again, that conflict of interest came into it, because that lawyer was involved in executive decision making and was therefore, not being able to be independent. So effectively, it was the same thing. But what was interesting there was the role of the DPO, this fictitious role almost, was effectively nullified. So it was treated as if it didn't exist at all. So there was no DPO.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
basically it was name only. It was just a few letters.
Absolutely. Name only, but it served no purpose at all. And I think, as a result, the company got into trouble.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you mentioned the solicitor, because what I was going to ask you was, can someone, like the general counsel, for example, double up as a DPO? And you kind of just, answer that, haven't you, Sona? Because there is conflict of interest there. So
of course
really,
there is. Yes, yeah. I mean, it's as you said, it might be the natural person to nominate. The lawyer, the privacy professional, the I don't know, the security person, the risk person. All of these individuals might have conflicts of interest, and that is the problem, because they need to be an independent person to be a DPO.
Yeah.
Because as I said, how can you maintain, how can you manage, how can you monitor compliance if you're influenced by what's going on?
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So I think what we concluded is that, the individual that can fulfill the data protection role, really, either internal or external. Ideally, you want it to avoid the conflict of interest in any possible way. It's really as a standalone role.
Absolutely.
So that kind of makes sense. Or you have the DPO as with a team where information security, compliance, for example, falls underneath or within the team of the DPO. Then everything is together, and then if the DPO sort of sits above it, he or she can then make sure that whatever the other elements of compliance do not raise, data protection risk or do not undermine the compliance to the regulation.
Absolutely. And in fact, actually, there was another case that I came across that was in Belgium, I think it was, or no, Berlin.
Okay.
Where here the DPO was actually the acting managing director. So you can see alarm bells going off, can't you? There it was held that the DPO was actually in charge of monitoring processes or processing activities that actually he himself contributed to. Makes a mockery of it, but again, it highlights the need for that independence.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember, again, I was looking to for a new accountant, so I was doing a bit of a shopping around, and I came across this, accountancy firm, and sort of local, and so I looked at their privacy notice, and what it says, the managing director, so and so is our DPO. I thought,
no, exactly.
First of all, you don't need one.
No, exactly.
Because the sort of relatively small, family-run kind of thing. So you don't need a DPO, number one. And number two, you're actually, causing yourself trouble.
Exactly.
When you don't need to. So
you don't need to, but I think, for the smaller businesses, when you don't need to, you need someone to be able to be the front person to receive the data protection, the data subject requests. And in that situation, I would say create an email address.
Yeah, just creating a mailbox.
Exactly.
So that,
data or data at, whatever.com.
Exactly. So that's all you need, you don't need to nominate a DPO. You're going to get into trouble.
Exactly.
Sona, thank you so much for joining me today again, and really enjoyed talking to you. Before we go, would you like to share with the audience how to get in touch with you?
Sure. Thank you so much, Cristina. I've had a lovely afternoon. I am the best, as Cristina said at the beginning, I'm a lecturer at City St George's, which is part of the University of London. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also a consultant solicitor for Osborne and Wise. The best place to get a hold of me is probably LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sona. And if any of you would like to get in touch with me, I can be found on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for CVG Solutions, or alternatively email me at info@cvgsolutions.co.uk. Thank you for watching.